again, back again. And we're back, and we're back, back again.
All right, and we are here again, and we are back again. As always, I'm Matt.
I'm Drew.
And this is the Back Again podcast. This is the only movie review show that takes a sequel from the past and asks the question, is it worth going back again? We are continuing on our comedy sequel list, and today we are doing the follow-up to the 1995 Friday, and we are doing Next Friday.
Come on. Daddy, stop! This is the rematch. Punch it! Yo!
Now, Craig, it's gonna be different living out here. Don't let your uncle or your cousin get you into any kind of trouble.
Next Friday comes out in 2000 and is once again written by Ice Cube, is directed by Steve Carr. It stars Ice Cube, Mike Epps, John Witherspoon, Justin Pierce, Don Curry, Tommy Lister Jr., Clifton Powell, and Lisa Rodriguez. Next Friday, this takes place not next Friday, but 4 years after.
The title's misleading because they pick an arbitrary Friday 4 years later, and then it's that next Friday.
Yeah.
So it's not the next Friday, it's a next Friday.
Yeah. But I was confused because they say it in a really quick throwaway line that it is 4 years later.
Yeah.
Because they do it through Debo. Debo's been in prison for 4 years, but if you're not like really paying attention, like we had to rewind it because I was like, oh wait, it's next Friday, and you're like, oh, did he already get like prosecuted and like
Yeah.
what did he got a trial in that short amount of time?
Well, do we need to give a breakdown before we start talking about, like, a breakdown of the plots?
Well, I didn't write one out, but I would say Next Friday takes place 4 years after the events of Friday, where Debo, now broken out of jail, is on the hunt for Craig, and because of this, Craig's father decides to move him into the suburbs, quote unquote, with his brother.
It's the Will Smith pilot, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. They took the idea to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like literally.
Yeah. Only I would argue that these suburbs aren't really the suburbs. They like present them as like just nicer houses in a cul-de-sac. There's like gang members that live next door, and you know.
Well, that's the thing. They're still like nice, like big houses. Like they're like just underneath mansions, I would say.
Well, that's part of the joke too, right? Because it's like, man, like even stuff goes down in the suburbs. So it's like the presentation of the suburbs, but then it turns out that it's also just as like violent as where Craig's from.
Which is interesting because the Joneses, they explain how the Joneses get the house there. Craig's uncle, because they won the lottery.
Yeah, he wins the lottery.
But like, how the gangsters, or how does the other neighbor, how do they like afford those mansions? They're not like, you think that they would be surrounded by like uppity, like I guess white, like suburbanites, but they're surrounded by other people from the hood.
Well, I mean, we would probably like assume that the gangster neighbors are there because they're like, you know, drug dealers and stuff, or they're just gangsters with money. I mean, really quick, I mean, let's just continue on this plot because I want to get to the gangsters and the money, because that becomes like the whole third act in the big like battle.
Yeah, we do a bad job of breaking down the plots. We need to do a better job of like actually describing the movies.
Well, very similar to all the sequels that we've done through all the seasons. There's going to be like kind of copies, right? Callbacks. But mostly like in the plot too, where it's another plot that involves we have to get money by a certain time. In the first one, it's giving money to a drug dealer by 10 p.m. In this one, it's we have to give money to the bank or else they're going to auction off their uncle's house.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's essentially the, what do you want to call it? The main motivation for the two movies.
And they have to just get money, I guess. So in this one, they just decide that they're going to have to get money by robbing the gangster neighbor's house.
They come up with that plan very quickly.
And not only that, they introduce the money itself very quickly. Like, you know, you would suspect them to show this metal cylinder. What do they call it?
I don't know what it was.
It's like an air tank or something like that.
At the end of the day, you would expect them to do it like they did it in the first one because it was effective. Because in the first one, there's multiple failed attempts to get money, and then the big one at the end, which I honestly forget how they do it in the first one.
Well, it becomes sidetracked because they originally try to rob Debo in the first one.
And then it becomes about confronting Debo.
Well, not only that, they kind of forget that because they just don't make the deadline. So they spend that last, and we're talking about the original Friday, they spend that last like hour together just hanging out in Craig's bedroom just waiting for a big worm to show up and kind of shoot them. And then when they leave the house, that's when they get shot up and stuff like that.
At the end of the day, they show different failed attempts in the first one. You think they would do that in the second one, but they don't. The money just falls out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then they're like, we need that money. They don't even know there's money in it because it's some strange cylinder thing that they think could have money or something valuable in it. It's not even like a small like traveling safe or like a locked briefcase. It's like a sci-fi thing.
But yeah, but even more so than that, they don't even introduce that tank until the third act, right? It's not like it's something they could have seen in the first act when we were first introduced to Joker. And then, you know, maybe somewhere in the second act, they think about maybe doing that. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that because we're not going to rob my gangster neighbors because they're going to kill us. Let's try other ways to get the money. And then like you said, you know, then there's more at least failed attempts like in the first one. But in this one, it feels like it's such a rushed plot to where, all right, we're in the third act now. What are we going to do? Well, the gangsters probably have some money, so let's just show them with some money really quick, and then they decide to rob them because we got to wrap this thing up.
They're not even like trying to find, because it's like what they're at Pinky's for like most of the second act.
Yeah,
goes nowhere. It's one of the more entertaining scenes, but it goes nowhere with the plot.
Well, this is a good time to just kind of explain like what is Friday, because when we're talking about these sequels and we're talking about the plot, I feel like it's important to be like, well, what kind of movie are they presenting to us in general before we kind of judge the plot? And with the first Friday, it's very like day in the life, right? And only on this Friday where it seems to be that everything unlucky is happening to Craig, through that he kind of discovers who he really is as a person. He kind of goes on an arc, I guess, a little bit, if you will. And we kind of wrap it up with this being like a quote unquote like magical day where good luck and bad luck kind of battle for each other. And he's just kind of like a bystander. Like I kind of thought about Clerks, you know, low budget indie film, singular voice, and it's a day in the life with a protagonist, right? So now when we have this kind of like next Friday, they're continuing on a little bit with that where it's another day in the life, but it just doesn't flow, I guess, as well as the first one, to where when he goes then to Pinky's or where he does stuff in Act 2, we're kind of just like waiting to see, well, what's the thing that's what's the stakes? Like when's something bad gonna happen? Because nothing really bad happens to Craig in the second one. He kind of everything bad happens to Day Day in the second one.
That's the problem is, and this is just an obvious problem, the main stakes are with, is it Devo or is it Debo?
It's Debo.
Debo's the main bad guy. He's like the main, you know, they're opening up the movie talking about him. Yeah. And then he's just stuck in the truck for literally the whole movie.
And he doesn't even get to really fight Craig at the end. As soon as he shows up, he immediately gets bit by the dog.
All the stakes are like, all the punches taken out of him.
Well, it's also, when you do a day in the life thing in the first one, this is also the first time all this stuff is happening to him. Even to the point where when you start the second movie, they do a recap of the first movie, and Ice Cube even tells you firsthand, like, that Friday was the first day I smoked weed. It's the first time I got shot at, and it's the first time I've kicked Debo's ass. Right? So there's like kind of milestones being done in the first one. In the second one, when it's a day in the life, there's not really a first of anything. It's just kind of him doing stuff. And then a lot of things repeat themselves from that specific Friday 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's not even like a callback to it, to where it's like, we got to steal money. And Ice Cube's like, oh man, not again. At least we're not. He's like, well, yeah, the bank's coming. At least they're not going to kill you. You know, like he doesn't reference the first Friday really.
Yeah, the only time they reference it is when the neighbor shows up at the bathroom.
Well, that whole storyline with the dad going to work and then accidentally, you know, picking up.
Lots of things. I don't think he was going to work. That's what's confusing, is he was driving Craig to Rancho Cucamonga.
Yeah.
Then he wasn't going to work. He was driving back home. And then he gets the call that Craig's in trouble, so that sends him back to Rancho Cucamonga. So he's not working during this movie. But he has dogs in his truck.
I think he's on the job.
I think it's his day off, and he keeps the animals in his truck. It's like, all right, I'm clocking out on the day before my day off. These dogs will last until I get back on the clock in 2 days.
I think
so he just keeps them in the truck.
I think it's more interesting that he makes it back into town so quickly enough to have lunch and then to use the bathroom for Debo and this new character that they introduced that we're just like supposed to know, but he doesn't look familiar. The guy that he's chained to.
He's just the other prisoner.
I know, but he's called him like, I'm your brother, like, let me out. Like, there's a moment when he was still trapped inside the dog cart, like in the third act when Debo finally gets out. And he says something like,
Come on, man. Let me out of here, man. Come on, man. I'm your brother, man. Debo! Come on, man. Don't do this to your own brother, man.
I don't know if he meant specifically that he is his actual brother in jail with him that he escaped with. I don't know. The point is that they just introduce a whole new character that's like, okay, I guess he's on this journey with him. And that whole storyline with the dad and with Debo and the third guy, it feels like a C story that's supposed to be there just for comedy, right?
But it's the main bad guy.
If these prisoners think that they're going to get revenge on Craig, and the whole time they get caught up in hijinks with the dad character, then that could be funny.
It's not even hijinks. It's just they're stuck in the
No,
truck.
they're just stuck in the truck. They don't even interact with each other.
They're literally just iced. They're put on ice until the end.
It's literally, we would just cut to John Witherspoon, just basically, I would assume, just doing improv for like 10 minutes. And then they cut it up into enough of like a C story.
So that's the big problem. The fucking antagonist is iced. And then the other thing is that the new threat, the gangsters.
Yeah. They're
ridiculous, and there's no connection between them and Craig other than we need money and they might have money. It's the flimsiest connection.
And also there's no connection to them and Day-Day's family and to his uncle's family.
Just their neighbors.
Because you expect maybe Craig to show up and kind of like, I mean, he saves the family by getting the money that they need for the bank, but he doesn't like really, we don't really know like what this gangster family is doing to torment his uncle's family or his uncle's house.
They aren't.
Yeah. They just kind of show up in the first act. And they kind of just show up in the third act.
Day-Day's just like, I don't mess with them. And it's like, all right, cool. So I thought Mrs. Ho-Kim was going to be more of a presence, because that's one of the big things in the first one, is that all these side characters are always around. And it's in their neighborhood. And then in the second one, in the cul-de-sac, they're never around. It's just them and the gangsters.
Well, not only that, it's only two neighbors versus in the first one, it's an entire neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like we get to see like, you know, the pastor come by. We get to see how the neighbor's having an affair. Mm-hmm. We also get to see like the local like, you know, drug addict girl that's going around trying to just like get drugs and sex off of people. But then her sister is Debbie that Craig has a crush on. And really quick, they do Debbie dirty in the second one because they don't even give her a line of dialogue of what happened to her.
Yeah.
They just introduce Carla, who is just also just happens to be the sister of these gangsters that Craig just has a crush on. And there's that really, first of all, she's barely in the movie.
I feel like a crush means that they've had like some kind of interaction or have some kind of deeper connection. They don't.
No.
He likes her because she's cute.
Yeah, she just shows up.
And then I don't know why she likes him. I guess he's cute.
Well, she likes him because he recognizes her struggle of living
That's
in
right.
the house.
Jesus Christ.
You did all this for me?
Most of it. I just hate to see a fine girl like you in a situation like this.
Thanks for noticing.
None of the dialogue made me laugh in the room way in the first one, but this one has some of the room dialogue.
But in general, I don't think these neighbors are as interesting. And when everybody kind of meets up at the end of the first Friday, it feels justified because this neighborhood is such like a tight-knit community that it would make sense that all these kind of random storylines eventually kind of cross over. But in the second one, when the storylines kind of cross over, it feels like just to kind of wrap things up at the end versus some kind of thing. I was asking you at the end of the movie, I was like, does Carla come back at the end? Because the last time he sees her, it's in the bedroom, like talking. And then he kind of falls out the window and then she kind of goes away. And then at the end of the movie, you would expect him to at least like have a conversation with her after, you know, all the brothers get arrested. And she's like, thank you for getting my brothers arrested. But
they set that up because she's like, next time, page me first. And then I'm like, oh, they got a pager.
Oh,
they never use
they never page her.
So they set it up like he's going to call her at the end or do something. Like leave a message.
Maybe
they never do that.
Maybe even when he's walking out of the house finally to go join his dad to drive back home, he looks at the number in his pocket and he thinks, maybe next Friday. Or maybe Friday after next or something like that.
Yeah, there you go.
Interesting enough, there is an alternate ending to this movie.
I feel like it would honestly be better than the ending they chose.
Well, and I kind of set this up by giving that pretend ending with him saying that, because in the alternate ending, he actually does say Friday after next. So when he's saying goodbye to Day-Day in the hallway before he leaves the house, in the original ending, Day-Day asks like,
when can I come and see you? Fuck your neighborhood up.
You can't.
All right.
And then it's just a hard cut to him going outside. He sees Day-Day's ex and her sister throw another brick at the car, and then he goes, well, I guess everything's wrapped up.
Yeah. That's the thing.
Wait, hold on. So he does that, and then he just drives off about how everything good ends on a Friday. In the alternate ending, he's back in that hallway with Day Day. Day Day asks him,
When can I come and see you? Fuck your neighborhood up.
I don't know, probably Friday after next. All right.
Then he comes outside. Instead of the pregnant ex, and the sister throwing another brick at the car, we see Carla pull up in her brother's car in the driveway.
Yeah.
She steps out, looks at Ice Cube, looks at Craig, blows a kiss, and then Craig goes, well, and then it's the same narration again. And then that's like the alternate ending. So it's weird that they changed it to where they're like, you know what? Cut out Carla. Let's try to squeeze another joke in with the ex and the sister messing up Day Day's car. I think it's a more justified reason for that narration to be like, well, another day, when it's the Carla ending.
Yeah.
But they didn't even change the narration.
And it's all of this stuff you mentioned it earlier. It's like nothing bad happens to Craig like it does in the first one. All just happens to Day Day.
Yeah.
And to the point where it's almost like a joke,
Yeah.
where it's just like, oh ha, something else bad is happening to Day Day, and it's like the character's likable, but what's the point?
Yeah, and like they don't really pay that off in any way. Where
that's the end. The payoff is that they're banging his car up again.
I know, but at the same time, it's not like anybody learned a lesson, or it's not like Day Day had anything to say about the day in general with like, you know, because I think they were trying
They
to
should have changed it to Day Day narration. So it's like Ice Cube sees it, he's leaving, and then Day Day just starts talking voiceover.
Well, I thought they were trying to do something with Day Day where he's like trying so hard to appear as like a player, because, you know, he says like, I'm a player, I'm a gangster, I'm a baller. And I thought the joke was supposed to be that like, no, you're from the suburbs. I'm your cousin who's actually from where all the players and the gangsters are. So the movie, he was going to get like kind of shit on because it was him kind of getting involved for the first time. Like it was all, so they were going to try to do like that perspective of it, but they don't really, they kind of just, you know, all the pieces there, they don't really like finish it off.
Well, it's like you think that he'd be getting shit on when Craig arrives, but what happens is he's getting shit on before that because the ex drama is happening before Craig arrives.
Yeah. And you know, that ex drama is no different to the drama that Craig is facing in the first Friday with his girlfriend, calling all the time and hanging up. In general, I just feel like that first one kind of had a point that it was trying to make. When they're writing the second one, I don't really think they're coming at it from like a standpoint of we're trying to tell a story that resonates true life for us. I think in the second one, they're just trying to make a comedy.
Yeah.
Right? And when you do that, yeah, there's more like kind of funny beats or moments or set pieces, but then the plot's just kind of thrown in at the last minute, and it feels like, oh, well, because like that first one's not amazing, but there's a clear voice to it, and there's a clear beginning, middle, and ending, which makes it really clean and neat. Another reason why that first Friday also, I think, pops out is because it's the directing debut of F. Gary Gray. I mean, he's done movies from The Negotiator, The Italian Job, Law Abiding Citizen, Straight Outta Compton, The Fate of the Furious. He did the bad Men in Black International, but the point is like he's a good director, and he's had a very good career. And I just think that there's like a voice to that first one, even from a directing standpoint, that's a little bit more unique, that sticks out. Whereas in the sequel, you get Steve Carr directing it, and Steve Carr.
What has he done?
He's done, he did like Dr. Dolittle 2, Daddy Daycare, Are We Done Yet, Paul Blart. And I don't think that Next Friday is like directed bad by any means. I think it's there really isn't like a style to it. I think it's just a really like
it's there to film the comedy.
I think he just like gets the job done. You know, but there's nothing really in the script for him to maybe give a perspective on, where I think there is a more kind of focused perspective in that first one. Now, we always do the Rotten Tomatoes scores as well. And even just to kind of strengthen this argument, the first Friday, which is just Friday, it's got a 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, right? But Next Friday has a 21%.
Yeah, makes sense, yeah.
And the reason why it's even made is because the budget for Friday was like $3.5 million. And they made $27.4 million at the box office. And the budget for Next Friday, they get $11 million, and their box office is $59.8 million.
Well, that's still not bad.
It's the highest grossing movie in the franchise, even though it's got this and then Friday After Next don't have very good Rotten Tomatoes scores. But yeah, I don't know. It just feels kind of like the reason why we do this podcast is because an original movie comes out, it becomes successful, and then because of that success, they decide to make a sequel. And I think that Next Friday is a perfect example of that argument. Do you want to talk about comedy sidekicks?
Oof, do we have to? It's not a strong point for this.
I did like, what's his name, Mr. Pinky?
Yeah, the Pinky sequence was really good.
Yeah, Pinky was really funny, and I actually know for a fact that he returns for Friday After Next, because I think a lot of people like his character as well.
Mhm.
I do want to go back though and just talk about the comedy sidekick, the comedy sidekicks, right? So we have Day Day and we have Smokey, and you know when Chris Tucker does this movie in 1995, this is kind of like a breakout debut role for him. I don't know why he doesn't return to Next Friday. I'm pretty sure it's because of money and because there was always rumors about how Chris Tucker didn't want to be in like vulgar or violent movies anymore, unless like Rush Hour was paying him big money. So what do? We introduce a new character, which is Mike Epps, who plays Day Day, and he essentially kind of has to be the same. What I'm glad that they don't do is I'm glad that they don't repeat that character to a certain degree or try to like imitate him.
Yeah, and at least they reference him in this one too, not like the girlfriend.
Only as in a throwaway line in the beginning. And I mean, yeah, if you're gonna do a throwaway line in the beginning, why not just mention Debbie as well? But yeah, I mean, they say that Smokey went to rehab, even though at the end of Friday he was like, I was just kidding. You know, I'm not gonna do that. At least Day Day doesn't try to. He's his own kind of singular voice, right?
What do they try to do? They try to make it a comedy duo.
Yeah.
So when they introduce Day Day so late in the game, we're spending so much time with him. Because I don't know if it's like a production thing, but it's essentially like to give him and Ice Cube equal screen time. Because it's a duo. They both have equal weight in this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like because he's introduced so late, we're rushing through his character. And it's like, why? I thought he was supposed to be a supporting character. It seems like the director and the producers thought that he was like the co-lead.
Well,
and I don't understand why.
Well, Craig doesn't know anybody in the like he's got to be kind of our introduction to this new part of town. So he's going to know all the side characters that Craig has to interact with.
But there are no side characters.
Well, there are side characters. They're just not as dynamic or interesting as the side characters in the first one.
But like I said, quantity-wise, there's not as many. There's like 3.
Well, even also just an arc for this side character. Like I would say Smokey probably gets the better arc in the first one, but I think Day Day is a little bit funnier. Like everyone's shitting on him, and he can just kind of complain and stuff like that. Like when they're getting duct taped, and he's singing "Friends."
Friends, ones we can depend on. Friends.
Like, I don't know. I think the performance is a little bit better. It's a very like rushed movie, but that drags out in a lot of areas where it's like you probably could have put more jokes. I mean, you got a bigger
like,
budget.
Why does Baby D want to go on a date with Craig?
Because
that's just there for that scene for like no reason. There's no follow through where he has to go through it. The Baby D doesn't bring it up again.
Well, let me ask this: why do women like Craig in general? I mean, is
that
Ice
was that was
Cube-
I kind of softly asked that earlier. It was like I don't know why. We answered that because he knows when they're not. What was it?
Oh yeah, well, he knows when they're not being taken care of. Or
exactly
something like that.
Yeah.
Thanks for noticing.
Well,
he's very empathic.
Like, man, women really.
And that's not to say Ice Cube. That's to say Craig the character.
Craig the character.
Because Craig the character, what does he got going for him?
He doesn't even have a job.
He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have a house.
Yeah.
He's like a couple years out of like college, I would assume.
Well, like even in the original Friday, they kind of do this beat of Clerks once again, where with Clerks, it's I'm not even supposed to be here today.
It's not even supposed to be here today.
And in Friday, it's you just got fired from your job.
How the hell you gonna get fired on your day off?
I don't know.
So then in next Friday, when they're doing this opening narration, they just mention again how he still doesn't have a job.
Yeah.
And you would think that,
well, the writers are like, oh, we'll bring that back because that's a big part of the first one. He didn't have a job.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's been 4 years. He needs to have a job.
So if we're going to do this plot of Craig showing up and messing up Day Day's life, why stop at the family just taking in Craig? Why not also be, you're moving to the suburbs, you're going to live a quiet life with your cousin, and you're going to work at Pinky's with him. So that way, when they get fired at Pinky's, it can still be Craig's fault, but it can be Craig's fault because he just got brought into Day Day's life, not a happenstance situation where Pinky shows up and thinks Craig's there to rob the place.
Because that is funny. What happens is his father, Willie, is driving him to his uncle Elroy's house, not to work, but just to live there and live the quiet life. Then, when he's already there, Day Day says, you need to get a job here. If you're living in this house, you got to get a job.
Yeah, he never gets a job.
And he
doesn't
does.
And he doesn't even have to live there because all the problems are solved by the end of the day. And he can just go back home.
Wait, yeah, why does all of this takes place over the course of a day, right? Because it's all next Friday.
It's all next Friday. Well, next Friday, 4 years from the last Friday.
Well, but whatever. So
Yeah.
when they get to the house, it's one day.
It's one
till the
day.
end of the movie, and then he goes home.
Exactly.
He was supposed to stay there for like a long time.
And you would think at least like he would complain about how he has to now like put himself in this new life and how he has to get a job. And maybe part of his plot is that he's trying to figure out a way to get home. But no, it's just he just shows up, a bunch of stuff happens to him, and then
He goes home.
He goes home.
Get that shit. Hurry up.
Oh, well. All's well that ends well, of course.
So as always on this podcast, we ask 3 questions that lead to a final vote. And the first question is, does it work as a sequel?
Nope. At the end of the day, it just takes the wrong things and focuses on those.
I'm going to be a little bit nicer and I'm going to say it does work as a sequel, but it's going to be the laziest check I'm going to give because I do think all the pieces are there. I just don't think that they finished it.
I think you've got to finish it.
I think you got to finish it too, but
Apparently you don't.
and I might change my mind on that, but just for the time being, I think it does work as a sequel, but just barely.
So that's 1x, 1 check.
Yeah. So the next question is going to be, is it enjoyable / entertaining?
No. There's entertaining moments in it, but in general, no. There's too many obvious faults.
I think it is enjoyable / entertaining enough. So where even if you didn't see the first Friday, I think you could watch this Friday and you would be okay with it. I don't think it's as good, obviously, as the first Friday. And to be honest, now that I'm like talking about this and I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna go back to the first question and I'm gonna give it an X. I don't think it works as a sequel. I think it's more enjoyable, entertaining, and that's maybe why I was kind of more lenient towards it. Yeah, so I'm gonna do a first time on this podcast. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna change my vote. I do not think it works as a sequel, but I do think it is enjoyable / entertaining. So the final question is going to be, does it need to exist? And I'll start off this one, and I don't think it needs to exist, to be honest. I think this is a clear cash grab. I think this is only because of the success of the first one. I think after a couple years of separation from the first one, as Ice Cube gets bigger, I think people are like asking him for a sequel, and he decides just to kind of flip one out real quick. But I don't think it needs to exist.
I don't think it needs to exist. That's the beauty of this, is that the flaws are so obvious.
Well, it kind of stinks too, because it's like you want to see different types of comedies.
Well, it
get put out there.
stinks because you see it work in the first one, at least
Yeah.
as much as it needs to, and then so there's no excuse for it to not work in the sequel. There really is nothing worse than like a worse sequel where there is something that works and then all they need to do is just do it again but a little bit better, and they can't even do it.
So if you're doing that math at home, that's 5 X's and 1 check. So it's going to get a big X for not worth going back again. As always, thanks everybody for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you like, subscribe, comment below. All these episodes are available wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can actually watch these reviews with video on YouTube. Just subscribe to What a Guy Productions. And outside of that, I don't know, you got anything else to add, Drew?
Sorry about today.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye.